Have you ever ordered something online, only for it to arrive, and the reality of the situation not meet your expectations? If this is you, then don't worry, you're not alone. This expectation versus reality gap can cause massive frictions and issues, not just with ordering things online, but also in relationships and a whole host of other things. Today, we're going to dive into how this expectation versus reality gap is created, and I'll give you 3 things that you can do to get yourself out of this expectation versus reality gap. I'm your host, Daniel James, and as always, if you're new here, welcome. So let's dive into this expectation versus reality. So I'm going to go straight to the board so we can sort of go into a bit more detail about this. Now, what tends to happen is we have this expectation of this thing. And again, it doesn't just come from things that we order online. It could be a relationship. So the first time you meet someone, you go on a date. It could be a job that you're going to start. It could even be, like myself, yesterday when I was at Villa Park watching the football. There is an expectation about what you're going to witness, what you're going to see, and what you're going to feel. But when the reality does not meet the expectations that you set, there is a gap that is created. And it's this gap that causes us that emotional turmoil. This is what can lead us to feeling angry, resentful, bitter, mad, whatever you want to call it, because that thing did not live up to the expectations that we had set in our minds. But the reason why we get this, and this frustration, this disappointment, this disillusion, is because it's an emotional response in anticipation to what we think is going to happen. What's happening is we're trying to predict the future. And what we're doing here is we're using like past experiences like cognitive bias that leads us to set these unrealistic expectations. We can become over-optimistic, or we're trying to search for that confirmation bias. This thing in our head, we've got it so fixated of, well, that happened last time, so it's going to happen again. Or worse, have you had this where you've got someone that hasn't really acted in alignment with how you would, and you say things like, yeah, but I wouldn't act that way. Once again, you're putting your expectations of how you or people that you know would respond to that. And then when other people don't live up to that, it kind of causes you to be a bit like, I don't understand. I don't understand why that person didn't live up to the expectations that I'd set. But it's also realizing it's very unrealistic to set expectations that everyone is going to respond to situations like yourself. It's just not going to happen. But it also happens because we have social media and the main media. And all of this stuff presents this idealized version of reality. So once again, how many times have you maybe gone to a hotel or to a restaurant because you've seen a social media influencer say how good the food is, how amazing the service is? So you go there with this expectation. I've just come back from holiday, which is why there wasn't an episode last week. And when I was on holiday, it was in Cape Verde. Again, very lovely resort. It's what is classed as a 5-star resort. However, it's not 5-star to what you would expect in the UK or in parts of Europe. So as soon as I say it's 5-star, straight away you've probably got an idea in your head. You've created images in your head about the experience that I would have had. And then maybe like, oh, do you know what? I'm going to go to that same hotel. So straight away, because I've said it's a 5-star, you have expectations. But the reality will be very, very different. Because as I said, it's not 5-star based on European standards. So Cape Verde is on the west coast of Africa. Again, beautiful country. But it's not a 5-star hotel to European standards. The pool was great. The service was fantastic. I thought the food was incredible. But there's a few little things where you'd be like, do you know what? Actually, I'd expected a little bit more. Now, I was having a great time. I wasn't complaining, but I can see why people do complain. The reason why people complain is because they've got an expectation and the reality is very different, and they're going to feel very, very disappointed. And that's because potentially they've seen stuff online, heard social media say things, whatever it could be, or even the hotel itself has set that expectation sky high, but it's fallen short. Because once again, maybe you've had a personal trainer or a coach, a therapist, counselor, whatever it is, and you've got this expectation of they're going to solve all of my problems. You expect them to do all of the work. But then when the reality is you've got to do some stuff and it's going to take longer than you think, you become disappointed, you become disheartened. And it's very, very natural because we also tend to overestimate our abilities to predict these outcomes. In our heads, we also expect that we can do more than we think. So again, let's use fat as an example. Oh, do you know what? I'll get in shape for holiday. Oh, I can do it in 8 weeks, no problem. And we overestimate how easy it's going to be and how hard life actually is. Because sometimes when we get into this headspace, I know that I certainly do, we kind of just assume that things are going to be smooth sailing. So before the football game, Aston Villa versus PSG, a lot of people were talking about, well, Villa just need to score 3 goals. And in my head, I'm thinking, you're completely disregarding the fact that we're playing against an opposition that are one of the best teams in the world, and they're not just going to roll over. So then straight away, you can see that people's expectations versus reality are very different, because people tend to forget and distort reality. Now, our brain naturally creates these expectations as a way to prepare us for making sense of the world. The brain is always trying to protect us. And sometimes, again, if you've ever struggled with any form of anxiety, it can be quite annoying. Because all anxiety is the brain trying to predict the future and worrying about all these different scenarios and situations, the what ifs, the maybes. And it can be annoying when it gets overworked and overstimulated. But with this expectation, when we go into these new environments or these new situations, we want to, as much as we can, be prepared so we don't get surprised. So we can actually manage and regulate our body and our emotions. But again, a lot of the times it doesn't work out that way. And again, we may selectively remember past experiences that support our preferred expectation. So once again, maybe you've had a breakup with a partner and you've had, 6 months off. You've forgotten all the bad stuff they did. They want to meet you for coffee, want to meet you for a drink. And once again, your expectation of the situation is that you're going to meet them and they're going to be absolutely awesome. Your expectation is that it's going to be exactly how it was. You remember all the positives, you forget all of the negatives. And then maybe that coffee date goes well. And then a few months later, reality sinks in and all the stuff that you forgot comes to the surface. And once again, you've got that gap in the middle of this expectation versus reality. That's the thing that causes the issue. So it's just realizing that we have this selective memory. How many times have you shared a story with a friend and your friend's been like, that is not what happened? You're like, yeah, it was. It's like, no, not at all. Because maybe you've made it sound like you did something amazing, but then your friend's like, that's not how it happened. Like, you did not save the day. So again, as we're talking through here, do you have an example that you can think of off the top of your head where you've done this? You've created this story, this narrative around something that isn't true, and then it's caused the reality to be a lot more painful than it actually needed to be. Because if you have, you're absolutely not alone. Now, the impact of this is that it can cause frequent expectation-reality mismatches that can lead to real big disappointment and then also perpetuate anxiety, because you're expecting things to go wrong. Because like, oh, well, last time I expected this and reality was this. So you can almost become a pessimist, because it's realizing that you've kind of got yourself into this cycle, not knowing how you've done it, not knowing why you've done it. So you're just worried about setting any positive expectations. So it can cause a really negative thing. And again, it's learning to manage these expectations while remaining hopeful, because that's the key. The key to life is remaining hopeful in difficult situations. Because without hope, like, it's a pretty negative and poor existence. Because you've got belief. And on one side of belief, you've got faith. And on the other side of belief, you've got doubt. I always believe as much as you can, you want to be living on the side of faith. And again, I'm not talking about faith in the religious sense. Faith, I'm talking about believing in the things unseen and believing that like things can work out. I always want to be pessimistic rather than optimistic rather than pessimistic. But it's realizing if you're stuck in that pessimistic cycle, it could be because of this expectation versus reality gap. So what are 3 things that we can do to manage our expectations for this expectation-reality gap? Well, the first thing is practice realistic optimism. That's basically maintaining hope whilst acknowledging potential challenges and limitations in any situation. Because once again, it's the fact that we've set up this unrealistic expectation. So we want to have the hope. You want to hope the football team can win. You want to hope that your ex-partner's changed. You want to hope that this cheap thing that you've ordered from a knockoff website isn't actually going to be too bad. But it's realizing that there is a chance that it's not going to work out. So it's just accepting that so that it lessens the gap. The reality of the situation, you're being more realistic and realizing that I hope this works out okay, but there's a chance that it won't. So just reminding yourself, doesn't mean you're living there, doesn't mean you get fixated on the fact it's not going to work. You're just being aware, it might not work out. And we can also start to develop mental flexibility, which is basically cultivating the ability to adapt our expectations with new information emerging rather than rigidly holding on to our initial assumptions. So straight away, we can make these assumptions, but you want to have that flexibility and be open to change. So I've got something in my eye here. So if you're watching on YouTube, apologies for me, keep rubbing my eye. It's realizing that you want to have that flexibility. Same with anything. When we're too rigid, we snap. So you want to have that bend. You want to have that flexibility. Just like you've got bamboo trees and palm trees. Again, they've got that ability to just sway and just move, which is, if you look at a lot of the infrastructure in Asia, Southeast Asia especially, when they've got earthquakes and stuff, that a lot of the houses are made of bamboo because it moves. It's not a static, flexible thing, because if it was, the house would crumble. So it allows that little bit of give. And that's the kind of mental flexibility that you want to be giving to these situations. And you want to engage in regular reality testing activities. So again, just seek some feedback and diverse perspectives to check whether your expectations are reasonable, especially for important decisions and goals. So again, just do your research. Again, either ask a friend, look online, and just see. So for example, the hotel analogy, maybe look online, see some reviews. Because once you do that, you can realize, do you know what? It says it's 5-star, but it's probably about 4-star. In European standards. Okay, I can deal with that. Well, why is it not quite a 5-star? Because of this, because of that. Okay, I can live with that, that's fine. Or you can ask someone that's been there. So there's loads of different things you can do. So it just builds this story. So you've got more information. So that maybe these unrealistic expectations can be lowered a little bit. Because a lot of the times we just set such unrealistic expectations for ourselves and other people, and it just causes us heartache. It can also cause friction in relationships. And it's got nothing to do with the other person. It's because we've set these expectations too high. If you've taken any value from today's episode, or you know someone that struggles with this expectation versus reality gap, don't forget to like this episode and share it with a friend. Until next time, take it easy.